We're starting off the countdown with the familiar Nazca lines. We've talked about them in some of our other alien videos as well as ancient art videos, so you may know what I'm referring to. These are the best known geoglyphs in the world and were made sometime between the 200 BC and 800 AD point. They're more than 800 feet long white line work etched into the Peruvian desert, the longest running straight for over a mile. They're alongside 300 some odd shapes and 70 figures and animals. The biggest shapes stretch nearly 1,200 feet across and are best viewed from air and certain vantages on nearby hills. Scientists suspect the Nazca drawings are as many as 2 millennia old, and because of their age, size, and visibility from above and mysterious nature, the lines are often cited as some of the best examples of alien handiwork on Earth. Otherwise, how would an ancient culture have been able to make such huge designs in the desert without being able to fly? And why? Eric von Daniken, in his 1968 book Chariots of the Gods, proposed that the ancient Nazca was a landing site for extraterrestrial spacecrafts. The alien beings supposedly imparted the local people with special knowledge and technology before returning to their home planet. After the departure of these ancient astronauts, the Nazca culture built a series of giant images and designs as messages to the extraterrestrial beings whom they viewed as their gods. You may remember debating this with your friends when it trended on Twitter, the helicopter hieroglyphic. Dendera's Hathor Temple has a bunch of funky stuff going on that we'll talk about in this video, the first being this. What you're seeing is hieroglyphics, and among them is a carving of what looks like a helicopter, even airplane or submarine, depending on how far your imagination goes, but I feel like the helicopter is evident enough for all of us to notice. Ancient astronaut believers have leapt on this, seeing a representation of modern technology in antiquity, knowledge perhaps given to the Egyptians by time travelers or extraterrestrial entities. As much as you may not believe in aliens, the explanation that archaeologists have for this actually does, suck. They're trying to pitch things like hieroglyphics depicting modern technology as an example of pareidolia, our tendency to perceive a pattern and meaning that isn't actually there. Because predicting a helicopter specifically exactly how it would look to a T is just a normal pattern recognition stuff. Usually pareidolia is perceiving a human face in the tree, not predicting a whole-scale invention. One viable argument, however, is in ancient Egypt it was common for hieroglyphics to be recarved over time, especially when a new pharaoh came into power. Digital imaging has shown that these carvings are overlaid, one original from the reign of Seti I and was remade for the reign of Ramses II. So archaeologists believe that the plaster used to cover the Seti I inscription eroded over time, which led to the appearance of a single combined image. What do you think? And while we're inside Dendera, watch your step because the melted stone staircase is here. Maybe not necessarily a hieroglyphic or a petroglyph, but it's altered stone and people associated with aliens, so it fits my parameters, make it work for yours. This is the Temple of Hathor. Look at that beauty. This site in Dendera is an option for travelers who want to take a honeymoon somewhere unexpected. Intricate figures and finely carved hieroglyphics haven't lost their charm over the years on young lovers. Now this is one of the staircases that leads out to the roof of the iconic Temple of Hathor at Dendera. It's built in pure granite and sandstone during the Ptolemaic rule around 300 BC. Yet the stone steps appear to be melted, and it's hard to imagine what could have managed to melt solid stone steps, seeing as the temperature needed to melt solid marble is 1,339 Celsius. It is believed that some of Dendera was built over another pre-existing site, as we know the priests would use this staircase to access the shrine of Hathor on the temple roof. The images on the walls on either side of this passageway even depict the line of priests who are carrying offerings up this shrine. Ancient alien believers theorized that the temple roofs were used to communicate with aliens that Egyptians worshipped as gods, and it could also be the reason that the stairs are melted. Perhaps it's the result of an alien landing or technology. Maybe the temple was built on a powerful alien site and the melted action is a result of that, or of an alien device once stored in this mighty and godly temple. Who knows? A break from Dendera before we revisit its light. Let's talk about the Topak Maze, an archaeological site located south of Interstate 40 near Needles, California. And while it's hypothesized to be a geoglyph, the purpose, age, and creators of the lines are highly disputed. A 1978 study by Arda Demheisnel proposed that the lines were prehistoric and had some sort of religious or ceremonial significance to the native Mojave people, and the modern Mojave people believe that this maze is a part of a spiritual portal to the next life where bad souls get lost and good souls find their portal to the afterlife. Early experts believe that the warriors returning from battle would also run through the maze, leaving any bad spirits behind in it. Regardless Regardless as to why it was created, the magnitude and magnificence of this geoglyph can't be disputed. How long this geoglyph will be able to withstand the elements is unknown, and how it has for an approximate 600 years is also unknown. What is known is the long-standing belief of the power and correlation of the site with souls of the dead. Many people have pilgrimaged over to the site in hopes of spiritual relief. This has inspired theories of alien involvement in the creation of the mass lines maze and its effect on a person being alien technology. The Blythe intaglios are sisters, not twins, with the Nazca lines. Located about 4 hours from Los Angeles in the city of Blythe, the Blythe intaglios are the most well-known of over 200 of them in the Colorado desert. That's right, we got a desert full of doodles, and it's the only known desert intaglios in North America. And while pictographs such as mountain lions, birds, snakes, and geometrics are strewn all over this desert, the human figures are only found near the Colorado River. The largest of the etchings is over 170 feet in length. These figures are so immense that many of them were not observed by non-natives until the 1930s, as they're best seen from air, so if you didn't pay attention to the ground as you were walking, it was easy to miss them if you aren't looking for them. Nobody knows what the figures represent, but they have some theories, and you can read about them on the plaques next to each fenced-in area if you visit the site. Many of the engravings are believed to date from the prehistoric period, but their age and identity of their creators are still uncertain, even as local indigenous clans have not claimed the making of the site, but some have claimed to use them for ancestral worship. The biggest mystery still remains how they made the giant works of art in the first place without being able to check their work from overhead. The correlation of the Nazca lines and the Blythe intaglios is natural for alien enthusiasts in the way that pyramids can be connected. There are once again theories of alien landing pads or dedications, and thanks to aliens above from humans below via artwork.
Number 5. Congress. May 17th of this year was the first United States official Congress hearing in the last 50 years. Monumental. From Blue Book to UAPs. They tried to make this hearing look as dated and as boring as they could, but there were 2 videos shown at the hearing. One, a USO, unidentified submerged object, shown only to officials at a closed room conference after the hearing. And this one, the 2.3 seconds of something shiny just whizzing by a ship. Apparently they said it was a deflated balloon. I'm surprised it's not swamp gas way up there. See, this is the government we know and love. Leaking and sharing. One terrible video out of 140 cases between 2004 and 2021, and this is it? This is barely anything. Lawmakers were shown declassified images and footage of UFOs. I'd love to see their faces before and after the briefing. You know, they just walk in, walk out. Number 4. Mexico. On March 5th, 2004, a Mexican Air Force flight crew filmed 11 unidentified flying objects in the skies over southern state of Campeche. But the public was not notified of the sightings until Mexico's Defense Department issued a statement on May 12th, days later. Of course, I get it, you gotta come up with an excuse, we get it. A press release was accompanied by a videotape that showed some bright objects resembling orbs of light moving quickly on an evening cloudy sky. The lights were actually extreme heat sources filmed by the crew using infrared technology during a surveillance mission in search of drug smuggling planes. They were reportedly flying at an altitude of about 11,000 feet. The Mexican Air Force has released footage of what a UFO expert said were 2, then 11 objects picked up as they whizzed around the clouds, sometimes disappearing totally. I just saw Jordan Peele's Nope, and the clouds thing is really messing with me. Yeah, spoiler alert. Sorry. Number 3. Chile. Experts still can't explain this next video captured from a Navy helicopter. After 2 years of study, Chilean authorities have declassified and released a 9-minute video of a UFO. On the afternoon of November 14, 2014, a Chilean Navy pilot and a technician were flying a helicopter along the coast when they saw something fishy. They were going north in a twin-engine Airbus Cougar when something appeared in the sky and matched their velocity of 130 knots. The helicopter's technician was testing the thermal imaging properties of the infrared FLIR high-definition camera. After minutes, the pilot and technician observed the object make 2 distinct discharges of some type, liquid or gas, which produced a red-hot signature captured by the infrared imager. The Navy turned the video over to the Committee for the Study of Anomalous Aerial Phenomena known as CEPHA. This is the Chilean government group that investigates UFO sightings. I guess the 6th observable is if you see a UFO fart, because yeah, that's clearly a fart, you know? Number 2, Spain. This next one, yeah, I don't know if it's real or not. I thought the Scorpion King with the rock was real. Yeah, the latest CGI, you know? So who knows? But I can't stop watching it. The video allegedly shows a UFO filmed by a fisherman near Galicia, Spain. The craft hovers over the ocean before splashing into the waters as military jets fly overhead. We see 2 fighter jets whiz by this fishing ship, apparently following this craft. There isn't any official info surrounding this video, I just felt like it's pretty modern and shows some F-18s and the speeds that they fly at, you know? The fishermen film a 42-second video showing what I guess would be the Spanish military chasing a UFO accompanied by an unmarked blacked out chopper, before slamming down into the water. If we use Elizondo's 5 observables and apply them to this video, we see low visibility, hypersonic speeds, and transmedium travel. The more I watch, it's gotta be fake, but after listening to all the fighter pilots talk about chasing these things literally into the water, it's got me thinking. I don't know. What do you think? And number 1, the Aguadilla Airport. This is probably my favorite UFO video. The longest, clearest, and most puzzling. The incident took place in 2013 in Aguadilla, Puerto Rico. Scientists who've analyzed thermal images of a flying object recorded in Puerto Rico are still trying to figure out what could have done this. A team of analysts working with the SCU, which is the Scientific Coalition for UAP Studies, a private group of scientists, military analysts, and investigators, produced a report analyzing this incident. It's a comprehensive stew of thermal, visual, and sensor data related to an unusual series of events in and around the Aguadilla, Puerto Rican airport. Yeah, they were experiencing a couple weeks of these things. This thing's just trucking steadily, splits into 2, turns directions. Safe to say this video does a great job of showing Lou's 5 observables. What do you think? Are these crafts being piloted, by the way, or are they being remote controlled? Either or, that's absolutely terrifying.
Number 10, Titanic. I cannot conceive of any vital disaster happening to this vessel. Modern shipbuilding has gone beyond that. That was a quote from E.J. Smith. Who was that, you may ask? None other than the excellent Navy expert who was the captain of the Titanic. Oof. It would be very funny if not so ironic, or maybe that's where the humor is. Regardless, the Titanic was a headline in the news even before it got wet in the ocean. The largest luxurious vessel ever constructed until now, and it was unsinkable. I don't know about that. What modern times we live in where ships no longer sink? What modern times we live in where ships no longer sink? Well, if you've ever seen Leo smooch Kate Winslet in the back of your grandpa's car, then you know how well that went. The Titanic rests 13,000 feet below the ocean, not too far from the rock bite. That's Newfoundland.
Number 9, Chernobyl. If you've seen the HBO miniseries Chernobyl, then you have a very good understanding of just how terrifying this is. Chernobyl is the site of the Soviet nuclear power plant that in April of 1986 had a serious accident due to a flawed reactor design and staff that didn't really get the best training. The accident itself was explained really well in the show and at the trial that took place, but it resulted in a steam explosion and fires that released 5% of the radioactive core into the environment. The explosion ended 2 workers' lives, with acute radiation poisoning affecting a confirmed 123 people and ending 28 of those people's lives as well. Around 5,000 cases of thyroid cancer with 15 fatal incidents were probably caused by the radioactive iodine fallout. Look, it was not good, it was scary, and what was potentially even scarier was the way people tried to cover it up.
Number 8, Berlin Wall. Mr. Gorbachev, tear down that wall. For the younger audience that doesn't know, let me break it down for it. After World War II ended, relations between the West and the Soviet Union broke down, to the point of global destruction. Germany, having lost to all parties during the war, got split up, capitalist and communist. Trouble is, people living on the capitalist side were just living better, so people began flocking over to the better side. The communist government decided to build a big bad grey depressing wall, monitored by guards with orders to open fire if someone tried getting across with the proper documentation or reasoning. This went on for a few decades until one day in 1990 when the border crossings red tape was cut and the wall began to come down brick by brick. That must have been something to watch, and I can imagine for those who got to witness it, they were glued to their television sets. Very cool. Cool history.
Number 7, One Giant Leap. As most humans know, we have gone to the moon. Unless you think it was faked, and in which case please civilly discuss below. But after After traveling 240,000 miles in 76 hours, Apollo 11, that's the 11th Apollo mission, entered into a lunar orbit on July 19, 1969. On July 20th, 1969, two men, American astronauts Neil Armstrong and Edwin Buzz Aldrin, touched down for the first time in the history of the Earth on the surface of our moon. And then 6 hours later, they left their craft and stepped out onto the surface. They left a plaque and some footprints, erected some flags, ran some tests, bada bing bada boom, and then they hopped back in the craft, had a little sleep, and departed on July 21st at 1:54 p.m. Earth time. And we've been back 5 more times since.
Number 6. The Roswell Incident. The Roswell Incident used to be the biggest event to ever happen in New Mexico history. Now it's being shadowed by a bald chemistry teacher, his science enthusiastic student, and a slimy lawyer. Who would have known? Well, for the second most eventful event to ever come out of New Mexico was the Roswell Incident. A mysterious flying object, other known as a UFO, crashed into the desert. Naturally, in the 1940s era US military, they kept secrets, the same way your mom holds on to family tea. Seriously, ask her about that one family member. She's gonna tell you something you don't want to know. This secrecy quickly spread rumors of it being an alien from outer space. Well, it wasn't until the 90s that this incident was officially declassified and declared to be nothing more than a weather balloon. Or at least that's what we were told. This didn't stop the town of Roswell, New Mexico, however, from adopting this alien rumor into the town's very fabric. To this day, the little green man can be found in Roswell as sort of a tourist attraction. Every town needs something.
Take me to your weeder. Take me to your weeder.
NASA. Number 5. Ivan Wagner. Astronaut Ivan Wagner was on the ISS as a first-timer in 2020. You think they do trades initiations to the rookies up there? Like no gravity and buckle you when you sleep? What do you think? He and fellow Russian Anatoly Ivashinin are working with Chris Cassidy up there, the American commander of said expedition. Wagner was then orbiting the Earth and might have actually captured footage of UFOs, better known now as UAPs. The aurora lights behind Earth's beautiful curves was being recorded, and it was seen. He labeled the video Space Guests. Wagner then tweeted the vid, the aurora australis near Antarctica and Australia, and then this blob of organized lights shows up. Of course, NASA didn't follow up. What are they gonna say? Yeah, that's swamp gas, birds, balloon, grass, cars, something up there. I don't know. Cut the feed. Cut the feed. Number 4, moonwalk. Yeah, so apparently the footage our parents and also 650 million people across the globe watched in 1969 was not the original footage. Hold up, what? Yeah, apparently what everyone saw on every television set across the globe wasn't as 4K as NASA's end. A man by the name of Gary George came across some very, very old tapes that might be proof as to what NASA sees and what they hear on their end. It's a little different than what we see. Gary George bought 218 surplus government tapes, 3 reels labeled Apollo 11 EVA. He auctioned them at Sotheby's, first generation of the moonwalk. So hold on. NASA just had a clearer copy of this the whole time? I get it, maybe they had a bigger budget. I'm thinking so we can't see what's in the background, or what's flying in the background, or any stars in the background. Yeah, I just wonder how long it's gonna take before Robert Bigelow or Tom DeLonge get their hands on that. Hey mom, there's something in the background, guys, pay attention. Number 3, Gordon Cooper. Leroy Gordon Cooper Jr. was an American engineer, test pilot, US Air Force pilot, and the youngest of the 7 original astronauts in Project Mercury. You know the pictures, it's the old school tinfoil suits. 1963, Cooper piloted the longest and last Mercury spaceflight, Mercury Atlas 9. 34 hours in space. The first American to spend an entire day in space, the first to sleep in space, and in Cooper's autobiography, Leap of Faith, he recounted his relationship with the Air Force and NASA and their relationship to the UFO conspiracy. Cooper claimed to see his first UFO while flying over Germany. He said that there were hundreds of reports made by pilots, many coming from military on radar. In 1978, he even testified before the United Nations on the topic. Radar operators, fighter pilots, fellow astronauts. He was a strong advocate for disclosure up until his passing. Number 2, lost in space. During the 60s, the space race was on between the Americans and the Russians. Like a good old hockey game, huh? Those two, always at it. The first to figure out what it is to put something or someone up in a little metal box. It was actually the Soviets that secured many of the early victories. While NASA's efforts were widely publicized, of course, sometimes the Soviets made it a point to never announce a mission until days after it was completed, and of course, successful. This allowed them to maintain control over information. Enter stage right, the Giudica Cordiglia brothers from Italy. Former amateur radio operators who apparently caught Russian audio recordings which allegedly proves the Soviets covered up cosmonauts' failed missions in the early 1960s. Apparently she's saying, help, help, I feel hot, am I going to crash? Yo, that is absolutely horrifying. If this is the real deal and the Soviets sent a woman into space that maybe didn't come back, this proves that whatever happens in space, stays in space. We're only told what we're supposed to hear. Number 1. Buzz Aldrin. American astronaut, engineer, fighter pilot with a doctor of science in astronautics. This guy is overqualified. 3 spacewalks in 1966, Gemini 12 mission. As the lunar module Eagle pilot on the 1969 Apollo 11 mission, he and mission commander Neil Armstrong were the first 2 to land on the moon. There was something out there, close enough to be observed, and what it could be, according to Aldrin on Apollo 11 to the moon, he observed a light out of the window that appeared to be moving alongside them. But what could it have been other than another spacecraft from another country, or maybe even another world? It was either the rocket that had separated from us, or the 4 panels that moved away when we extracted the lander. After he returned home from his missions, he was convinced that he saw aliens while he was out there. Credentials aside, Guy took a lie detector test, which he passed with flying colors. In an interview with C-SPAN, Buzz talked about the future potential of the Earth's moon for humanity. He added a little extra info that might have ignited the spark to go back, regarding a certain monolith on the moon. Quote, visit the moon Phobos of Mars. There's a monolith there, a very unusual structure on this little potato object that goes around the moon once every 7 hours. When people find out about that, they're gonna say, who put that there? Yeah, I'll be the first one, Buzz. Who did put that there?
Starting off with S for secrets. Alrighty, so here is from the Polish Constitution Day celebration in Chicago, specifically the one from 1978. On the left there, all washed out and crappy old flash display style, is First Lady Rosalind Carter. The guy shaking her hand, or rather just holding it and staring off camera like a waiter just went by with a tray of warm sausage rolls he wants to really get into, is John Wayne Gacy. And if you're also thinking, yo, what is up with this guy being in so many random famous photos, you're absolutely right, and it's genuinely strange how photographed and out there Gacy was. By the time this was taken, he had already killed over 20 people. Also, when he wasn't side hustling as a clown, he was super active in the government and politics, thus why wearing the S on the lapel. It was given to him by the Secret Service to indicate special security clearance, so the S literally does stand for secrets, both the US government's and his own. Whose secrets are worse though, huh? Anyways, at the bottom of the handshake photo, you can see the handwritten address to John Gacy, best wishes, Rosalind Carter. I've heard beauty is pain, but I haven't heard beauty is the next Saw movie? Check out the Beauty Calibrator. Seeing pictures, you may think it's some sort of Middle Ages torture machine, or as said, literally one of those Saw movie head devices. But surprisingly not, it's another way to point out women's insecurities and find the smallest things possible to make them feel bad over. Meet the Max Factor Beauty Calibration Machine. It is the only one in existence, thank God, and in 1932 the makeup legend Max Factor came up with this ingenious invention combining phrenology, cosmetics, and insecurity gaslighting with pseudoscience analysis of a woman's physical flaws. Max Factor's Beauty Calibrator enabled Hollywood makeup artists to pinpoint where facial corrections needed to be made down to a literal fraction. The machine, also known in the trades as the Beauty Micrometer, revealed that a natural perfect face was a myth. Every single woman was imperfect and needed correction, and this machine could find it by taking precise measures. It would mark spots that needed to be fixed, and then the artist, once the helmet was removed, could correct all the new insecurities with makeup that you didn't have before you put the stupid thing on. Next up is a photo that's all dramatic flair, the death card. Mafia represented an outdated mindset in the Mafia world, one that could no longer be reasoned with diplomatically. The same is true of his rival Maranzano. The ongoing tit-for-tat killing between the two genuinely wreaked havoc on not only the streets, but in the Mafia hierarchy itself. Those resistant to change generally don't last long, and meetings of the Mafia elite tried to bring around at the end the bloodshed, but Maranzano especially consistently manipulated matters to his own advantage. In order to facilitate underworld peace, the consensus turned from diplomacy to the inevitable. One of these guys had to go. The final straw, according to the account of Nicola Gentile, was when the police informants called Masiria and said knock off the violence. Having an idealism for peace, he actually responded by disarming his men, and they were all pissed. Joe the boss, Masiria, his bodyguards, and Lucky Luciano all met at a seafood restaurant at 3 p.m. on April 15th of 1931. Luciano excuses himself from the card game while that they're playing to visit the bathroom. This is the signal for the hitmen. The bangs could be heard from around the block apparently, as Joe was hit from behind 4 times in the back and 1 in the head. And it's born, the infamous Ace of Spades shot. It added to the cult status of this hit, but many expect that the Ace of Spades card was placed between Mysterious fingers after the hit by a photographer just for the shock factor of the press. Next is a series of photos recovered before they could be lost. Holes in a window. Former LAPD reserve officer turned photographer Merrick Morton was faffing around in the LA Police Department when he comes across a stash of LAPD crime photos ranging in the dates of 1920s all the way to the 1970s. These were cellulose nitrate based film, and the negatives were so decomposed they're deemed fire hazard, but Merrick saw enough of the few stills to know that they'd be an absolute effing gold mine. Working with Phototeca Photo Digitation Service and the US National Film Archive, the photos were given a new life. This collection is NSFW and there are hundreds. Now spruced up, the macabre photos are mostly crimes and many of them violent and depicting the bodies or surviving victims' injuries. Obviously the ones you're seeing on screen as I'm talking are tamer, such as my choice, the one you're seeing now, holes in the car window. Something about it gives me a deep sense of discomfort, thus the choice. The collection contains recognizable crimes and faces too, an unusual photo of Malaya Nurmi dressed as Vampira, pictures of comedian Lenny Bruce's OD in March of 1966, and images of the Manson family arriving at their arrangement in 1970. Every photo is scary and every single has a disturbing backstory. Some captions are provided by author James Elroy in his book LAPD 53. You can win, but sometimes you still lose in the end. It's the devastated Disneys. Meet Howard Ashman and Alan Menken. There are some everyday photos of these two in their prime. Who were they? In case you couldn't tell by all the Disney crap in the background of said photos, they played somewhat of a big role. You know, writing the lyrics and music for Oliver and Company, The Little Mermaid, Aladdin, and Beauty and the Beast, as well as a few others. Also not to mention creating the Little Shop of Horrors, which got them hired by Disney in the first place. And in this photo you see now, they had just won the Oscars for The Little Mermaid. Hooray! But why does Ashman look so unhappy? This was his life's accomplishments. It's because that night Ashman told Menken they needed to have a serious talk when they got back to New York, and when they get back a few days later, Ashman admits that he has HIV that's quickly progressed and he's going to die soon, and fast. They had been songwriting partners for over a decade and were in the middle of working on Beauty and the Beast, and despite the illness, Ashman completed the lyrical work and the initial work on Aladdin. On the morning of March 14, 1991, he does die from heart failure caused by his condition. At the time of his death, he only weighed 80 pounds, he'd lost his sight and could barely speak, and a voice that spoke so eloquently through song was lost forever. Before he passed, however, Disney Productions scrambled to finish the film so he could see a screening of it. The film earned Ashman and Menken 3 1991 Academy Award nominations for Best Song, and the title song winning the award. Perhaps most amazingly, Beauty and the Beast was the first animated film ever nominated for an Academy Award for Best Motion Picture. So it looks like a photo of two men achieving their wildest dreams, but it's a record of their last normal moment together.
Number 5. Rendlesham Forest, the Roswell of the UK. Boxing Day, 1980. The forest lays between the military bases of Bentwaters and Woodbridge. 3 a.m., 2 military personnel, John Burroughs and Jim Peniston, respond to bright lights in the forest. The radios stopped working. There was a static feeling in the air and an odd absolute silence. The closer the men got, the more they realized it wasn't ours. Peniston was drawn in and touched the craft, instantly electrocuting him and apparently downloading him with odd symbols and star system maps before the craft then blasted off. 24 hours after, the craft returned and Deputy Commander Charles Halt is now witness in the exact same spot. The trees, petrified. The ground, radioactive. And there are 3 large landing holes in the grass. Years later, Burroughs and Peniston still continuously ask the British government for their medical records from that night that they never received. Almost 32 years later and still, nothing. Creepy. Number 4. Zimbabwe children. In 1996, a mass sighting was witnessed by an entire school in broad daylight in Arua, Zimbabwe, Africa. More than 150 students and staff were present. There have been tons of documentaries surrounding this case. Face to face, arm's length with the craft and beings, the children, who are now mostly in their 30s and 40s, are still convinced. More than 100 students can still remember what they claim to be telepathic warnings from the creatures surrounding our use of technology and the hazards it has on our planet. Drawings, first-hand interviews, and the weirdest part, all the same story. Same description of the craft, same description of the beings, Director and writer James Fox documents this infamous interaction in his 2020 documentary called The Phenomenon. If you haven't seen this, check it out. I'm telling you, it's worth it. Number 3. Skinwalker Ranch. 500 acres on this land in Ballard, Utah, the most bizarre spot on Earth. Skinwalker, getting its name from the first Navajo people's word for an evil spirit that inhabits the human form. The reports start in the 30s with the Myers, then the Shermans in the 90s. Then, Robert Bigelow, creator of Bigelow Aerospace, purchases the ranch for the development of UAP and consciousness research with the Advanced Aerial Threat Identification Program, or also known as ATIP. Gifted a budget to conduct research, this is where it starts getting weird. 2013 UAP researcher Brandon Fugel then buys the ranch from Bigelow, and History Channel's team of the Skinwalker Ranch series, an entirety of a crew of about 160 people, remain there to this day, conducting experiments and living on the land. Some examples of reports are hundreds of unexplainable cow mutilations, flying discs, orbs, ghosts, Bigfoots, and of course, a giant pulsing magnetic signature buried under the mountain. That's horrifying. Number 2. The O'Hare Airport. The O'Hare Airport incident happened at approximately 4:15 p.m. broad daylight on November 7, 2006. Chicago O'Hare International Airport receives a report that a group of 12 airport employees were witnessing a metallic saucer-shaped craft hovering still over gate C-17. The object was spotted by a ramp employee first, then it was witnessed by pilots, then airline management, and numerous mechanics simultaneously. No air traffic controller saw the object on radar. A completely silent 7-meter dark gray saucer sits. Several witnesses outside the airport also saw the object, ringing up local police and reporting numerous phone-ins describing a disc craft hovering over the airport for numerous minutes without moving. According to another witness, the object then shot straight up through the clouds at high velocity, leaving a clear blue hole in the clouds. According to the Chicago Tribune the next day, the disc was visible for over 5 minutes and was seen by dozens of airport personnel. And coming in at number 1, we have the Tic Tac. November 14th, 2004, 100 miles southwest of San Diego, California, the USS Nimitz Carrier Strike Group, which included the nuclear-powered carrier and missile cruiser the USS Princeton, were conducting a series of drills in the Persian Gulf. Around 2 p.m., 2 FA-18 Super Hornet fighter jets from the Nimitz received an unusual ask to help with a real-time world mission. The Princeton's radar, which had been picking up objects for several days. The Princeton's senior radar screen showed over 100 UAPs in just that week alone buzzing the ships. When noticed one of the objects was flying about 50 meters above the water, Commander David Fravor and the Black Aces Squadron described it as about 40 feet long, shaped like a Tic Tac candy with zero means of propulsion. Fravor decided to intercept the object at this point, and the object started copying the jet's maneuvers. Impossible by physics standards today. After engaging the UAPs, they vanished, and the strike group remained active, confused, and awaiting disclosure. Yeah, I'd say this encounter is the absolute best proof we have to this day. What do you think? Coming in at number 10, we have the Tic Tac. Not the breath freshener candy, I'm talking about the shape of an alien mothership here, you know? The Tic Tac shape has been reported for decades by UFO witnesses and pilots all over the world, and this video was one of the 3 that the Pentagon eventually have declassified in the past few couple years. The Tic Tac incident begins around November 10th, 2004. When radar operators reported seeing odd and slow-moving objects flying in groups of 5 to 10 off the coast of San Diego. Commander David Fravor and the Black Aces Squadron were asked by the USS Nimitz if they could aid in identifying what exactly was over their radar for the past couple weeks. The 2 F-18s chased this during an exercise. Yeah, imagine chasing a UFO. Like Top Gun 3, Reptilians. One of the pilots, Chad Underwood, got video and his displays caught some pretty crazy stuff. All the pilots who were involved said the object looked like a large white Tic Tac candy, unlike any other known aircraft. These objects have been sighted overcoming the Earth's gravity with no visible means of propulsion. They also lack any flight surfaces such as wings or lights. So what exactly is this flying candy? I don't know. And number 9, the Go Fast. This next video was the second out of the 3 videos that the Pentagon finally declassified. I say finally after they got leaked, and then the Pentagon of course was like, oh yeah, those 3 videos, yeah, of course they're authentic. Like, yeah, thanks for the heads up. The video shows a rounded object absolutely hauling ass across the water. The USS Theodore sent out some jets to see what the buzz was. The latest tech from the US can't even really get a read at first, but after some recalibrating, the fighter jet's systems picks up and locks onto its target. The relief and confusion from the pilots makes this video great. They can't even believe what they're witnessing. After playing with different mods, the backseater is able to show the steady moving object in different lenses, infrared, thermal. It's the real deal. I would have just pretended to pass out as soon as we were close, you know what I mean? Just whoop, whoop. Number 8. Gimbal. When Lou Elizondo ran the Defense Department initiative called the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, or ATIP, he compiled a list of logic-defying capabilities most commonly associated with UAP sightings. The new term for UFOs. Yeah. He calls those traits the 5 observables: anti-gravity, sudden acceleration, hypersonic velocity, cloaking and low visibility, and transmedium travel. The third video leaked and finally declassified from the Pentagon is the Gimbal video. We're taken aboard the same carrier ship, the USS Theodore Roosevelt, taken also in 2015. The video shows a flying object and was shot off the screen of an operator aboard the USS Roosevelt. It moves, turns, rotates. Yeah, how much movement it isn't making is actually the scary part. So stationary, no means of propulsion, no exhaust. This thing's weird, dude. The official Navy video was taken in 2015 and filmed aboard a Navy fighter jet from the nuclear aircraft carrier, the USS Theodore Roosevelt, off the eastern coast near Florida. And this thing looks like a floating spinning top, just sitting there. I'm just gonna say it, that's what I think it looks like. You know what I mean? Number 7. Swarm splash. We now have 2 videos taken from military personnel from apparently the same incident. Isn't that interesting? Makes it realer and realer, doesn't it? The radar footage released by Jeremy Corbell shows multiple objects popping up and around the Navy's USS Omaha from an incident in July 2019. The ship was about 125 miles off the coast of San Diego when the footage was recorded. Radar shows the USS Omaha absolutely being swarmed by 14 UFOs. In the same incident, that a spherical aircraft was filmed disappearing into the Pacific Ocean. Okay, this is getting scary now. Same ship, 2 vids, same time. The radar shows the blips hovering around the ship, not really doing anything. Also, imagine 14 unidentified aircrafts above a US warship. It would be game over, like boom 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 dude out of the sky. But instead, we're just left with the videos, scratching our heads, in awe. Then the thing splashes into the water, showing transmedium travel. You can hear the operator say mark bearing and range, so they were clocking these things. This has unlocked a new fear of mine. Yeah, water. Jaws has nothing on me now. Number 6. Pyramids. The video and photos of this next encounter were originally shared at the Office of Naval Intelligence briefing on May 1st, 2020, and later leaked to Jeremy Corbell, filmmaker and ufologist. For those of you who don't know Jeremy, he's like our guy. He's pushing the boundaries, he's putting pressure on officials, he's a filmmaker and an avid UFOer like me. And he's got his hands in some pretty deep pockets. I'm just as puzzled with this video as you are. Green pyramids? Pulsing? The leaked video of flashing triangle-shaped objects that flew over a US warship is the real deal, the Pentagon said, after UFO investigators released the video and other puzzling photos online. Shot through night vision from the ship itself, the Pentagon confirmed in a statement that the leaked photos and videos were captured by official US Navy, though it's declined to label them as UAPs. Quote, I can confirm that the referenced photos and videos were taken by Navy personnel, Pentagon spokesperson Susan Gao said in a statement. Okay, so they're real, but what are they? Is this what the Egyptians based theirs off of? I don't know, what do you think?
Number 5. Kennedy. The assassination of JFK was an instant conspiracy theorist dream come true. And a national tragedy. Yeah, it was. From Lee Harvey Oswald, the Blam Blam, the Trajectory, and Jack Ruby, it's just a really strange story. And everyone was blamed from the grassy knoll to Soviet sleeper agents, or it could have just been a nut job. No one's really 200% sure. What am I getting at with this? Well, it's all fishy, and for some it felt staged from the start, especially if you understand the connection between the Kennedy family and La Cosa Nostra. The Irishman movie actually explains a lot of this. I would highly recommend that movie. But it could be related back to the associates of a Russell Buffalino, a known organized crime king and racketeering magnate. Regardless, it'll always feel weird and staged. Just strange. Number 4. Sputnik. The space race. What a time to be alive. It truly must have been something to see. For those that don't know, the space race refers to a time during the Cold War when America and the Soviet Union were dumping millions of dollars and hours to see who could dominate space. America being presented as the country with the technological advantage, and honestly, it wasn't propaganda at that time, they truly did have the advantage, were visibly shocked when the USSR had launched the first satellite into space. Before this, there were a few things here and there, the first rocket, the first dog, the first man. While the first cosmonaut was concerning for Americans, it was the launching of Sputnik 1 that was the scariest, as it seemed the Soviet Union may actually have the upper hand. It kicked the space race into overdrive. But surely nations wouldn't compete on such a science fair level, right? No way. Seems kinda sus. No. Number 3, Elvis Presley. Look, this makes a lot of sense when you think about it. Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll and the gyrating hips. Oh baby. He came to fame in the early to mid 1950s and broke records instantly. In a sense, he was the first celebrity that we idolize, or at least the way we idolize celebrities today. Elvis couldn't really do anything without the paparazzi following him or fans screaming and shouting his name the second the man made an appearance. Years of rocking, partying, and fried peanut butter banana bacon sandwiches caught up with the king, as he looked closer to me in leather suits than Adam would. It was kind of a weird look. He passed away on August 16th, 1977, and well, it does seem kind of strange that the king would leave the building like that. There's even some reports of him showing up later in life in disguises. So perhaps maybe he didn't, or did live or die. We'll never know. Number 2, the Roswell incident. Roswell, New Mexico, 1947. A mysterious UFO makes a crash landing in the New Mexican desert. Military and government officials are quick to clean up the mess and haul the wreckage to Area 51, or so the story goes. It wasn't long before folks started claiming it was little green men from outer space, and given the scientific and militaristic weird testing that actually happened in the deserts back then, well, it kinda adds up. However, the US government has since declassified the event as a weather balloon crashing. People like to think it's still aliens, but what if it was staged? Hear me out here. Meaning, what if they crashed a weather balloon to make you think it was an alien, and something like that actually happened elsewhere? A classic illusion, or distraction, if you will. And number 1, any alien abduction. They all feel staged to me. Every once in a while you scroll through some TV stations, assuming this is a few years ago and you still have cable, and you'd see a guy with a weird haircut talking about ancient aliens building pyramids. History Channel can be weird sometimes. You may also come across real life encounters of folks who swear they've encountered aliens and were abducted. To me, it sounds like a lot of people want their 15 minutes of fame and perhaps inflated stories for the sake of good television. To me, it's strange a bunch of rural Americans getting abducted and perhaps receiving probes where the sun don't shine. There's a lot of that going on. It's a little weird. I was abducted by aliens. They took me out of my pickup truck. It was strange. There were lights everywhere and someone touched my buttocks.
Number 10. Al Worden. American test pilot, engineer, and NASA astronaut Alfred Merrill Worden. The pilot for the Apollo 15 lunar missions in 1971. One of the 24 people that have gone to the moon. Woohoo! He orbited it 74 times. Well, he was the first to even drive a moon car. Worden remained at NASA until 1975. And then it gets a little weird. Recently, on a morning show, they asked Worden, why do we keep going back to the moon? He paused and said, quote, survival. Survival of our species. When pressed on aliens, he said, you know, we are the aliens, right? We just think there's somebody else. We're the ones who came from somewhere else because somebody else had to survive. They got in a little spacecraft and they came here and they landed and they started civilization here. And if you don't believe me, go get books on the ancient Sumerians and see what they have to say about it. End quote. Yeah, that's not terrifying at all, Al. Number 9. Edgar Mitchell. Edgar Dean Mitchell was a US Navy officer, aviator, test pilot, engineer, NASA astronaut, and of course, ufologist. Ufology is the pseudo term for somebody who studies UFOs. I don't think there's like a degree you can just get that in. If so, where? I'm signing up. Just needed a name for it, I guess? I don't know. The lunar module pilot of Apollo 14 in 1971, guy clocked 9 hours working on the moon. He was the 6th person to walk on the moon as well. Mitchell publicly expressed his opinions that he was sure that there were thousands of UFOs recorded since the early 1940s, apparently belonging to other planets. Thousands of them. NBC conducted an interview in 1996. He talked about meeting with officials from 3 different countries who said that they had met ETs in person. Quote, the evidence for alien contact is very strong and classified by governments who are covering up visitations and the existence of alien bodies, specifically in places like Roswell, New Mexico. Sorry, do you mind if I just see his credentials one more time? Thank you so much. Number 8. James McDivitt. James Alton McDivitt is an American test pilot, Air Force pilot, engineer, and NASA astronaut who flew both in the Gemini and Apollo programs. McDivitt was selected by NASA for the Gemini 4 mission, and in 1965, he saw, filmed, and photographed an object, which approached the Gemini 4 as they were orbiting Earth over Hawaii. Apparently, the UFO had a long arm sticking out of it. Quote, quote, "I was flying with Ed, he was sleeping, we were drifting, when suddenly an object appeared in the window. A cylindrical object, white." The film was then sent back to NASA and reviewed by NASA film technicians in 1975. It looked like a white beer can with a pencil sticking out of it. Yeah, he tried for years to get the word out about the phenomenon, but NASA lost those pictures apparently. Oh, that James, he's a crazy one up there in space with all those degrees he has. What a wacko. Number 7. Dark Side of the Moon. Not just an absolute banger of an album, also one of the most terrifying mysterious places in our galaxy. The dark side of our moon. Since the 1950s, NASA has seen and heard some pretty weird stuff back there. See, once you sign that non-disclosure, they kinda own ya, you know? Despite what you may have heard, it's true that the Apollo 10 astronauts did hear some interesting sounds behind the moon, described as outer space type music. Audio recordings from the Apollo 10 mission, astronaut Gene Cernan asks John Young if he hears that. Gene calls it music and says it even sounds outer spacey sounding. Young says, "We're gonna have to find out about that, because nobody's gonna believe us." Hey man, no one believes anyone who's gone up there, so don't take it personally. Astronauts go through visual and audio testing like the Navy SEALs. They know what they're doing. If they say Angel by Shaggy is playing back there, I'm believing them. Number 6. Leland Melvin. American engineer and NASA astronaut on board the space shuttle Atlantis, selected by NASA in 1998. This guy's put in time with mission after mission. Melvin has over 565 hours in space. Quite the practice at the whole floating around thing, I'd say. When Leland then was pressed about otherworldly visitors, he said he had seen something translucent, curved, and organic looking when he was working with fellow astronaut Randy Bresnik. The pair called the ground to ask NASA what it could be, and NASA's response was, probably ice, probably ice. Nice and scientific, Houston. Thanks for that. Mr. Melvin dismissed this and figured it was just NASA's explanation to cover it up. Like, who's more qualified here? That's all I'm asking. When the most qualified people are like, yeah, I can't tell if that's frozen water or a spaceship. Either they shouldn't be up there at all, or they need some more Windex on those windows now.
Now we ask ourselves, what happened to Walter? Ain't no way this wasn't a crime, okay? I'm just saying that for everyone familiar with this case now, thanks to Clint Eastwood and Angelina Jolie tearing it up on the big screen with the 2008 film Changeling. Single mom Christine Collins reported her 9-year-old son Walter missing in March of 1928 from their home in Los Angeles. 5 months later, police brought Walter back to Christine, except it wasn't Walter, and Christine knew it was some stupid little placebo punk kid with a badass attitude. But the LA police dismissed Christine's concerns. She's a single mom in the 1920s, working and living on her own without a man. Culturally, that was her tombstone, and the police went so as far as to accuse her of being a terrible mother and having her committed to a mental hospital. The fake Walter Collins obviously outs the fact that he's a fake. He's 9. How the hell does he know to keep a police secret? The real Walter Collins was never found, and over time, authorities came to believe he was one of the victims of convicted killer Gordon Stewart Northcott, with Northcott's mother even making a confession for Walter's death on her son's behalf. Whatever happened to Walter Collins, his body was never found, and no one actually learned what really happened, nor has it been explained why the police were so invested in covering up the boy's disappearance instead of just trying to find him. Hey guys, can you move that coffin real quick? I need to put a subway here. Thanks. 2,500-year mystery, hot off the press of 2020, past and present collided in a very literal way when a 2,500-year-old killing victim was uncovered during an archaeological dig preceding the installation of a high-speed rail line in London. For those of you unaware, under the Crown it is mandatory for archaeologists to comb a site before anything can happen there. This kind of crap is why. While the cause of death wasn't immediately obvious, it was hoped that with time and further examination, the skeleton would yield more clues about who he was and what become of him. Archaeologist Rachel Wood explained he seems to have had his hands tied and he was face down in the bottom of a ditch. There is not many ways you end up like that. She also continued to say if he was struck across the head with a heavy object, you would find a mark on the back of the skull. If he was stabbed, you'd find blade marks on the ribs. So we're hoping to find something like that to tell us how he died. Interestingly though, the large-scale dig that went ahead of the rail line project revealed more than 60 other ancient sites of interest, including the remains of an ancient village nearby. It would have been in use from 3,000 to 2,000 years ago during the Late Bronze Age and survived until the Roman invasion of southern England 2,000 years ago. When there's only
only a finite space in which to be, how did we lose 3 lighthouse keepers? In 1896, the Board of Trade funded the construction of a lighthouse on the largest of the Flannan Isles. In December of 1899, the lighthouse was completed and lit for the first time. 4 lighthouse keepers were assigned to maintain the lighthouse and work a rotation of 6 weeks on, 2 weeks off. This meant there's always a bare minimum of 3 men on the island at a time. In mid-December of 1900, the 3 men on the island were 43-year-old principal keeper James Ducat, who had a wife and kids and 20 years of experience, the 40-year-old occasional keeper Donald MacArthur, who was married and covering for the first assistant keeper, and the 28-year-old second assistant keeper Thomas Marshall. Around midnight on December 15th, a steamship Arctur passed the Isles. The captain noticed he couldn't see the light from the lighthouse, and the conditions should have allowed him to. When the Arctur arrived in port, they reported the light absence even though it was never communicated to the Northern Lighthouse Board. On December 26th, the lighthouse tender ship Hesperus made a routine visit to the island, and when near the island, Captain James Harvey found it odd the Scottish flag had been removed from the flagpole. He then sounded the horn to get the attention of the 3 lighthouse keepers, but there's no response. They attempt firing a flare. No response. Island seems normal. Entrance gate and entrance door, and the door after that, all locked. However, the kitchen door is found open, and the fire hadn't been lit for several days, and all of the clocks were stopped, every bed empty, every room untouched, and the bodies of 3 men never found. I hope I never meet the attic neighbor. On an evening of March 31st, 1922, on the Hinterkaifeck farm in Bavaria, Germany, 6 residents are slain with a pickaxe. The victims included a husband and wife, Andreas and Kaliziar Gruber, their widowed daughter Victoria, Victoria's kids Kaliziar II and Joseph, and the family maid Maria. Joseph and Maria were both killed while in their beds. However, the rest of the family was then killed in the barn and stacked on top of each other. Let's make this worse somehow than a literal pile of corpses. Investigation concluded that their killer actually lived on the farm for 6 days after smoking the whole family. Cattle were still being fed, meals were still being eaten in the kitchen, neighbors saw smoke from the chimney, and the family dog was tied to a post when the mailman came on Saturday. The bodies were discovered the next day because the dog was still there. And now, for even worse, Maria was actually hired the same day she was killed, replacing the previous maid who had quit 6 months earlier due to the house being haunted. Said maid reported to the family hearing footsteps and voices in the attic. Around the time that the previous maid had quit, the Gruber family also started to hear voices from the attic. Add in a set of house keys had gone missing, and unfamiliar newspapers found in the house that nobody had ever seen before, and now there's scratches on the family tool shed like somebody tried to pick the lock. Maybe it's time to check the attic or move? The father Andreas also reports seeing a pair of footsteps leading from the woods towards the back entrance of the family's house. What did you do? Look at that. Damn, that's crazy. Off to go get killed, I guess. What? Despite repeat arrests, nobody has ever been found, and the files were closed in 1955. The house was also demolished. And last but not least, a puzzling puzzle. In 2011, a mass grave was discovered in southern Poland, dating back 5,000 years, and contained the bones of 15 people, including women, young adults, and only 1 man. The DNA testing shows us that the 15 bodies in total are actually related and belonging to the globular amphora culture, which emerged in Central Europe around 3400 to 2800 BC. Polish experts suggested that the people were executed during a ritual ceremony since the remains were found lying close together, bodies and limbs overlapping, implying a consecutive, if not simultaneous, ending for all in, well, the pile. Sorry. While we might be shocked at such a dark discovery, the scientists called the find a intriguing scene. This is not just because they're a bunch of tasteless nerds, but because mysteries like these allow them to test their skills, bringing together several disciplines, including forensic archaeology, criminal anthropology, and the genome-wide analysis. And archaeologists can use this technology to better understand not only how this group lived, but also how and why they died. The archaeologists so far concluded that they may have been killed during a time of dwindling food stocks, which would explain why only women, elders, and young adults were found in the sacrificial pit. Artistic reconstructions of this mass grave found in Poland illustrate entwined mass of bodies, along with an analysis of their kinship relations. Evidently, these individuals were buried by people who knew them well and who carefully placed them in the grave according to familiar relationship.
Number 10. Roswell. The birth of the UAP phenomenon. Post-Cold War, 1945, the US's first nuclear explosion. 1946, the first underwater nuclear explosion. 1947, the first crashed flying saucer. Local rancher Mac Brazel finds the wreckage on his property in Lincoln County, New Mexico. Sheriff Wilcox shows RAAF's commanding officer Colonel Blanchard the materials, and during the night, the Air Force combs the entirety of the property. Apparently, harboring 2 small injured alien bodies. Taking them then to Kirkland Air Force Base, New Mexico that night, the very next morning, the Roswell Air Force makes a statement claiming that they have recovered a crashed flying disc in local newspapers. Boom! History, baby! A photograph of Jesse Marcel, the head intelligence officer who investigated and recovered some of the debris. The very next day, the Army retracts their statement, however, and all of a sudden, a high-altitude weather balloon, aka the birth of the conspiracy theory. Nuclear fission explosions, weather balloons. Something's not adding up here. Number 9, the Washington Flap. July 19th, 1952, air traffic controller at Washington National Airport spots 7 slow-moving objects on his radar, a fleet of flying saucers. 2 F-94 interceptor jets take off and become scrambled as each of them approached, radar included. 7 days later, the UFOs are back over the nation's capital as 2 more jets scramble trying to chase it down. One of the pilots sees a bright light in the distance and decides to give it a chase. Quote, "I tried to make contact with the bogies below 1,000 feet. I saw several bright lights. I was at max speed, but even then I had no closing speed. I ceased chasing them because I saw no chance of overtaking them at all." Newspaper headlines around the US scream, quote, "Saucers swarm over Capitol," and quote, "Jets chase DC sky ghosts." Probably not a good idea to just fly over the Capitol without saying hello first. Number 8, Betty and Barney Hill. The first real documented UAP abduction case in history. Betty and Barney Hill, married couple, New Hampshire, were driving home one night from a 3-day honeymoon when a light started following them in the sky. Pulling over after minutes of tailing, Barney got out of the car and gazed into the sky. From this moment on, the couple say 2 hours were lost. Betty's dress ripped, Barney's shoes scuffled, and both their watches 2 hours behind. Thinking nothing of it, they both reached home confused, and after weeks of no sleep, the couple reached out to a psychic researcher who could help them, and under hypnosis, the couple made some terrifying claims. They both, on separate occasions, claimed that they were separately walked into a large metal disc by small gray beings, and continued to operate and experiment on the couple on board. Blood taken, bodies examined, and both of them downloaded an understanding of a star system called Zeta Reticuli. The Hills stuck to their story for the remainder of their lives and remains one of the first and crucial American accounts of alien abduction. Number 7, Area 51. This secret base in the Nevada desert acts as the US's military hub for spatial engineering, maybe even some reverse engineering. The area is named after the geological grid of the desert. Groom Lake, Dreamland, this place has tons of nicknames. The area gained notoriety in the early 90s when numerous claims that workers had worked on alien aircraft and even heard of harboring alien creatures underground. The entire premises is fenced off with signs saying no photography allowed. Use of deadly force is authorized. That can't be good. Whatever they're hiding here, it's mostly military. The base has been a testing facility for the Air Force and remains one of the most highly secured and secretive bases in America. Remember the 2019 Storm Area 51 movement? Yeah, no one got him. Even the famous Bob Lazar has claimed he was an employee here. What do you think? Number 6, Travis Walton. The horrifying abduction of local Arizona forester Travis Walton. Some of us know the name from the movie Fire in the Sky, based on this exact case and filmed in 1993. On November 5th, 1975, Walton and a number of others from the logging crew were working with timber in the Apache Sitgreaves National Forest. While riding in a truck with 6 of his coworkers, they allegedly encountered a saucer-shaped object hovering about 100 feet away, making a high-pitched buzz. Walton exited the truck and ran over curious. A beam of light then appeared from the craft and blasted him unconscious. The other 6 men were terrified and drove away before returning moments later in a panic to a now vanished Travis. Walton claims that he woke up in a hospital room observed by 3 short bald creatures. He fought with them until a more human-looking figure led him down another room where he then blacked out. Walton claimed that he remembers nothing else until he found himself awake, walking alone a highway 5 days later naked, clueless of what had just happened. It's terrifying. Number 5. Werewolf of France. In 18th century Gévaudan, France, a horrific amount of slayings had residents boarding up their doors petrified. Not a man, ghost, or ghoul, but a monstrous wolf beast. Jeanne Boulet was mysteriously found dead in 1764 with her throat more or less gone. Then another victim a month later, same thing, throat basically gone. Hundreds more were mauled with their throats and chests apparently eaten. Survivors who witnessed the attacks described an enormous wolf-like animal covered in black fur. The newspapers quickly dubbed the maulings as, quote, the beast of Gévaudan. Hundreds of hunting parties in the wake. Jean-Baptiste Duhamel organized more than 30,000 volunteers to hunt down and kill this thing. Still, yeah, no luck. And the body count just continued to grow. An estimated 300 people perished from these attacks. Historians have yet to agree on what exactly happened at Gavaldon. Some say it was simply mass hysteria, and some say simply a pack of wolves. Scary stuff, you know what I mean? Scary stuff. Dyatlov Pass incident. A puzzling one to say the very least, this event in which 9 Soviet trekkers perished in the northern Ural Mountains between February 1st and 2nd, 1959, under very uncertain and still confusing circumstances. The experienced trekking group from the Ural Polytechnical Institute, led by Igor Dyatlov, had camped on the eastern slopes of Russia. Overnight, something caused them to cut their way out of their tent, flee barefoot, not dressed for the sub-zero night, and then perish. Investigation determined 6 of them died from hypothermia, 3 died from physical trauma. Okay, buckle up. 2 of the bodies had missing eyes, 1 had a missing tongue, and 1 had missing eyebrows. Apparently some clothing had traces of radiation on it as well, and reports of strange lights in the mountains as in orange orbs were reported the very same time. Lots of theories from Bigfoots to UFOs to military experiments. Officially they landed on avalanche and accidental. I'm honestly surprised there's not a movie or a Netflix series about this yet. Number 3. The Kaimuki House. Do me a favor and cancel that surfing trip immediately. Okay, maybe not. Apparently murder in a most foul nature has occurred in that house, many times. Known by locals as the most haunted place on the island, the house itself looks like a pretty normal surf-friendly home. Enter stage right, the Kasha. A creature apparently said to reside in the actual house. A man-eating ghoul from Japanese folklore. Not just a story either, the events from the Kaimuki House have been well documented over the years. Interpretations of this monster includes a ghoul who lives and feeds on the dead, or a cat-like demon from the sky who steals away bodies. In 1942, police officers were called to a house by a woman repeating, "She's trying to get my children." The officers could do nothing but watch in horror as members of the family were levitated, ragdolled, and hurled across the room by an unknown force. Yeah, haunted. Number 2. The Devil's Bidding. The devil made me do it. Actually now an official term of phrase pleaded before a court of law. Who'd have thunk that possession under demonic influence could be argued against in a Supreme Court? Rewind to 1981. Ed and Lorraine Warren, famous demonologist duo, were called and documented to the exorcism of then 8-year-old David Glatzel. Attended by his family, his sister and her boyfriend, and Father Gordon, a priest of Connecticut. During this horrifying exorcism, the sister's boyfriend invites the demon to enter his body instead of remaining in his sister's little brother. The Glatzels, including the Warrens, apparently witnessed the demon that was possessing the boy transport itself from one body to the other. Cut 2. The boyfriend then goes home and stabs his landlord multiple times under demonic possession, apparently while growling like an animal. This case became the first American murder trial to claim demonic possession as a defense. This is absolutely jarring. And our number 1 spot, of course, the Octavius. The Octavius became more than just a sailor's legend in 1775 when a whaling ship named the Herald found it aimlessly drifting off the coast of Greenland. The scary part, with all of its crew frozen dead. Frozen solid by the Arctic mists and winds. To add to the spookiness, the ship's captain was found still sitting at his desk, pen in hand at the logbook in front of him, finishing an entry from 1762. The Octavius, a legendary ghost ship. Apparently the schooner was found by the 5-man boarding party. The entire crew of 28 below deck, completely frozen solid and almost perfectly preserved in time. The last entry in the log was from November 11, 1762, accounting the ship had been lost in the Arctic for more than 13 years. Yo, that's terrifying. Just seeing a ship sail up beside you? Ahoy! Oh my goodness!
Starting off this list in our number 10 spot, we have the eruption of Mount St. Helens. Mount St. Helens is a stratovolcano located in Skamania County, Washington. This volcano is best known for its huge and disastrous eruption on May 18, 1980. This photograph comes from photographer Robert Landsberg, who of course was in the area at the time of the eruption. Before the eruption, he had visited the area in order to photograph and document all of the changes that were happening. On May 18th, 17th, he was within a few miles of the volcano when it erupted. Since he unfortunately was located so close to the explosion, he knew he would be unable to escape this disaster, so instead of focusing on the impossible, he focused on taking as many pictures as possible. Robert was obviously incredibly brave and dedicated, but also very smart. After snapping as many photos as he could, including this one, he then secured his camera in his backpack and covered his backpack with his body. He knew he was unlikely to survive, but wanted to make sure that these photos did. His body was found 17 days later with his backpack still underneath him. His film was of course developed and has provided geologists with some really valuable insights with his close documentation of the eruption. In our number 9 spot today we have the core. This photo shows a physicist named Harold Agnew, and while this looks like a relatively normal, non-threatening photo, what he has in his hand is truly devastating. Harold is holding the nuclear core of what was nicknamed the Fat Man atomic bomb. This means that Harold is holding the nuclear core of the atomic bomb that was later dropped on Nagasaki in 1945. The immediate blast, of course, took many lives, but so did the long-term effects of the bomb, like radiation illness and that sort of thing. It's crazy to look at a photo like this because it seems just so perfectly normal when he literally has a life-changing, world-ending device in the palm of his hand. Also, I don't think I could ever hold something like that. Not only would I just not want to, but I would just be so afraid that something was gonna go wrong. In our number 8 spot today we have the Challenger crew. This is a photo that was taken of the clearly very excited Challenger crew as they walked down the ramp ready to head off on their mission. The crew even included 37-year-old Krista McAuliffe, who was a high school social studies teacher. She had won a spot on this mission through a program with NASA called the Teacher in Space program, and she had trained diligently for months in order to be the first non-military person in space. On January 28, 1986, the Challenger mission proved to be fatal just 73 seconds after liftoff. 2 rubber O-rings failed because of the cold temperatures of the morning, and on live television, the world watched as the spacecraft broke apart and plunged into the ocean, sadly taking the lives of everyone on board. It is an absolutely tragic event made even more chilling by this final photo. In our number 7 spot today we have the plague. This photo comes from the 19th century, from the 3rd plague pandemic. This was the first time that the plague had spread to all 5 continents. While we now know something about what that might have been like, what we haven't had to endure are the doctors that dressed like this. This is a photo of the outfits and masks that plague doctors wore when they would come to your house to treat or diagnose you. The long beak-like noses of the masks are very creepy, but they were used to hold herbs and other nicely scented things because they believed that it would help ward off the bad air, which at the time is what they thought was causing the sickness. A pandemic certainly is bad enough. Thankfully our doctors and nurses are just sticking to scrubs. In our number 6 spot today we have the elephant's foot. This photo looks like it's just a big lump of nothing, but it's called an elephant's foot. Don't worry, at first I was a little worried too, but it has nothing to do with elephants and is only named that because of its appearance. This lump was actually created from the Chernobyl nuclear meltdown, and it is just a mass of corium and other materials that were in the core of the reactor. This elephant's foot was located in the steam distribution corridor, which is under what's left of the reactor. While this mass doesn't produce as much radiation as it did before, it does still, to this day, produce a deadly amount. It is said that if you stood in front of it for just 300 seconds, that would be enough to get a lethal dose of radiation. It's kind of crazy that even though they knew this, they were still standing there taking pictures of it, but I'm just glad because we all now get to see it, and it gives us just a little more insight into what exactly happened that day.
And back to Hathor Temple for Dendera Light. And it's not even actually a light, so major punk with that one. It's actually a stone depiction of what's potentially a light, located in a long underground passageway directly beneath the main temple that is completely covered in carvings. According to Egyptologists, the bulb-like structure represents the womb of Nut, the goddess of the sky, which is also a common depiction of the night. It's been a major source of controversy in Egyptian history since many fringe historians interpret the depiction as evidence of a modern lighting system, similar in appearance to a Crookes tube. Supporters of this theory claim that electrical light would give an explanation explanation to the absence of lampblack deposits in many discovered tombs in Egypt. The Dendera light is often used in similar context as the Baghdad battery, in the assumption that ancient cultures were much more advanced than we believe today. Naturally, this opens the doors for conspiracy involving aliens, as it's often assumed that ancient civilizations found technological advancements through their intervention. There is a mainstream explanation from Egyptologists that makes the most sense and collaborates with other transcriptions in the temple, but we want irrational alien theories, so we're gonna ignore that and move on to the Atacama Desert geoglyphs. Suck it, Nazca lines, because these glyphs are monstrous, covering 150 plus square kilometers compared to Nazca's only 250 square kilometers. However, there are similarities outside of their whopping size difference, so maybe I'm speaking too soon. Both Nazca and these Atacama glyphs had multiple symbolic or ritual purposes, but the Atacama glyphs also had a vital role in the transportation network connecting great South American civilizations. Using artifacts and stylistic characters, archaeologists believe the earliest was first constructed between 600 and 1500 AD. The widely varied geoglyphs are in geometric, animal, and human forms and are in about 50 different types. Some geoglyphs are found in isolation, some are in panels up to 50 figures. The most frequent type of geoglyph is geometric forms such as circles, circles with dots, rectangles, crosses, arrows, parallel lines, all sorts of stuff. This Atacama Desert is known for alien association of all kind. In 2018, a tiny alien skeleton found here pretty much broke the internet. It was actually technically found in 2002. There's the Blood Red Lagoon, mummies that are older than the ones in Egypt, and some of the world's clearest stargazing can be done here. Another alien associated part of Atacama is the Atacama Giant. I wanted to talk about it separately because it deserves its own attention. It's the largest Atacama desert carving, 390 feet tall and carved into a hillside. It's undoubtedly alien in appearance. It is the largest prehistoric anthropomorphic. It has been suggested that the petroglyph represents a shaman, spiritual figure, or deity, but there is little evidence to corroborate these claims. Scientists think that the Atacama Giant was likely an astronomical guide, as the lines that stretch off of the figure's head predict the movements of the moon and can be used to map the changing of seasons. By knowing this, the day, crop cycle, and weather patterns, they could determine a lot. Or, as some believe, perhaps it really is a depiction of the alien who created it or them. Several of them represent enigmatic anthropomorphic figures with elongated or ovular heads along with geometric patterns. Personally, I think he's creepy as hell, so let's just shuffle on. Next up is the Caral Screamer. You may recall the Caral from the top 10 ancient alien discoveries that will confuse you video. These ruins are the oldest ruins of the oldest civilization in all of South America. The site dates back 4,000, even 5,000 years, making it one of the oldest cities in the world. This site consists of 6 stone pyramids that were found next to large amphitheaters, ceremonial rooms, altars, and many other structures. And after excavation started on this site in 2001, there was a lot to discover, such as treasures, history, and lore. And just half-mile southwest at the city's pyramids and mounds, the Caral Screamer. Notice the D-shaped head and its large gaping mouth with wild raked hair. The facial features include a sliced half nose and sagging almond-shaped eyes. Its mouth appears to be open in a horrified screech. This geoglyph is similar to the screaming, bleeding figures found etched into stone walls at the site called Senchana in Cosma Valley, 150 miles to the north. But like those, it's unclear what this petroglyph means. It is believed to have been constructed around the same time as Caral and have been associated to a nearby ceremonial site. Many wonder how this face was made, similar to the Nazca and Blythe lines, without any vantage point. And for what purpose? This is far less easy to brush off as ceremonial than something like patterns, squiggles, and lines. Unfortunately, Caral history is mostly lost, as is its civilization. However, it's drawn lots of alien attention, as lots of temples are built at the 450 AD point. Its circular formation is similar to many others. It's been assumed to have a landing pad of sorts, and there is belief that astronomically it's connected to sites nearby. And the last on our list is the alien art of Chhattisgarh. I'm sorry if I say that wrong. These paintings are vividly red and in remarkable condition. Located about 130 km from Raipur, the caves come under the Villa Chandelier and Gotatolia land in India. Extensive research is needed for further findings. Chhattisgarh and its surrounding areas presently doesn't have any such experts on prehistoric or archaeological findings who could give clarity on subject, so it's about patiently waiting for that access. In the meantime, however, there are several beliefs about paintings among locals in the villages. While a few worship the paintings, others narrate stories that they've heard from ancestors about Rohela people, aka the small-sized ones, who used to land from the sky in a round-shaped flying object and take away 1 or 2 persons of the village who never returned. Could be onto something. There is a cave painting depicting a craft with fan-like antenna and 3 legs for a vehicle stand, but that could just be a coincidence. The paintings are done in natural colors and the paints have hardly faded despite despite the years. The strangely carved figures are seen holding weapon-like objects and don't have clear features, oftentimes missing a nose and mouth. Some pictures it appears that the people are even wearing a form of spacesuit, to which archaeologist J.R. Bagard replies, "We can't refute the possibility of imagination by prehistoric men. Humans usually fancy such things." He continues to say that art depictions are similar to that of aliens seen in Hollywood and Bollywood, adding that the findings suggest that humans in prehistoric times may have seen or imagined things from other planets, which creates curiosity among the peoples and the researchers. Starting with the classic case, deathbed and breakfast. Lizzie Borden took an axe, gave her mother 40 whacks. When she saw what she had done, she gave her father 41. While the rhyme isn't true in all senses, Abby Dufresne Borden was her stepmother and the weapon was a hatchet, not an axe, it is right in the description of Jackson and Abby Borden being slayed remorselessly and beyond recognition in their beds the morning of August 4th, 1892. In the early hours after the discovery of the bodies, people only knew that the killer had struck the victims in their home in broad daylight on a busy street 1 block from the city business district. There was no evident motive. No neighbors and passersby heard nothing. No one saw a suspect enter or leave the Borden property. But the perfect Sunday school teacher, Lizzie, was inside the whole time. Lizzie was later arrested and charged for the deaths of her parents, but was acquitted by a jury in the following year of 1893 despite having lied about calling a doctor, never crying for her family, and buying literal poison right before they died. Cultural, religious, class, ethnic, and gender divisions in the town would shape the debates over Lizzie's guilt or innocence and ultimately free her. Overall, just being a spoiled, privileged white woman in this specific time played a role in letting Borden, the definitive killer of her parents, go free. And into the pit of bones we now go. National Geographic calls it the world's oldest M-word mystery, and it's safe to say that this killing is one that will never be solved. The victim was discovered in eerily named Pit of Bones in Spain. It's a fascinating archaeological site even without the discovery of an ancient killing. Researchers have found it's the final resting place for around 28 individuals who were somewhere between Neanderthals and modern humans. It's one of those finds that makes the scientific community foam at the mouth, and it turns out criminologists would probably now like this one too, because the victim had been laying exactly where he was thrown for a shocking 430,000 years. So how can we tell this just wasn't another burial? The others were of different ages, showing signs of conditions that would make daily life impossible without a caregiver, and most were actually, properly buried. The fact that the mysterious victim's wounds never started to heal made it clear. No one ever wanted them to be discovered. The killing blow caused 2 identical mirror skull fractures, something anthropologists, crime or hysterical status otherwise, can agree is a common result of blunt force trauma. The body was then thrown down 43 feet into a cave to rest for thousands of years. A bit more recent history is a fear of water. On November 29th, 1981, around 7:30 a.m., actress Natalie Wood's body is found floating face down in the Pacific Ocean, about 200 yards offshore. She'd been one of Hollywood's recognizable names and faces. You may recognize her from airings of Miracle on 34th Street each holiday season. Eerily, Woods' mother had taken Natalie to a fortune teller for fun as a child. Wasn't so fun because she told Natalie that she would die by drowning one day. It inspires paralyzing fear in her as a child. She's afraid to even wash her hair and had reoccurring nightmares. Then Christopher Walken one day joins Natalie and her husband Robert Wagner and Dennis DeVerne on a yacht weekend. The group left in the afternoon on November 27, 1981, and Robert berates Natalie all evening. On the 28th, after a dinner and lots of drinking with Walken, the two reboard the dinghy at 10 p.m. Witnesses from a nearby boat claim they heard shouts at midnight. However, there's a party going on nearby. They thought it was from the party and they didn't intervene. One of the witnesses, John Payne, said he heard a woman scream, "Help me! Someone help me!" coming from the stern of Wood's yacht. But then he thought he heard a man's voice say, "Okay, honey, we'll come get you." But the tone was so mocking, he thought it came from the party. According to Wagner, there was a non-violent argument that broke out between him and Walken over politics. Woods was bored with it and went to bed, and Wagner didn't realize she was missing until he went to kiss her goodnight at 1:30 a.m. The Coast Guard's alerted, and Wood is found floating 6 hours later, about a mile away from the yacht and the dinghy not too far from her. Angeles County coroner ruled her cause of death as accidental drowning and hypothermia. Woods' sister Lana expressed doubts about this being accidental, as have many, and it remains unsolved. Watch your step or you'll be looking like him, the Graball Bogman. The remains of the Graball Bogman were discovered by a peat cutter working in the bogs in 1952. Imagine the poor dude finding that. The eerie, well-preserved state of the body, thanks to the horrifying yet magical workings of bogland, has allowed experts to learn some incredible things. They can tell, for example, he lost a front tooth when he was somewhere around 5 years old. His last meal was cereal, they know that because the hallucinogenic ergot fungus was found in his stomach and intestines, but before the snap, crackle, pop, he had had a meat-heavy diet. With
they haven't been able to determine is why he was killed, cause it wasn't the poison mold this time. One injury, the fractured skull, happened after his death. The broken leg, however, likely happened around the time he was killed. It seems as though he was hit with a blunt object that shattered his shin and swept him off his feet, just in time for an incredibly sharp blade to cut his throat. Whomever had done it had grabbed him from behind, Ramesses III style, and cut so deep it went to his spine. The Grabal man died somewhere between 400 and 200 BC, and all signs point to him being perfectly ordinary Iron Age farmer, someone's papa or neighbor, who wanted him dead and why. Next up is two samurai with one stone. Sakamoto Ryoma is a iconic Japanese figure, best remembered as the man who brokered the peace deal between the warring provinces of Satsuma and Chosu so as to conquer the shogunate. Yet as Ryoma's influence grew, so did his enemies, and on December 10th, 1867, just a month after the restoration of imperial power, he, alongside his ex-sumo wrestler bodyguard and fellow samurai Nakaoka Shintaro, are killed. The bodyguard was the first to be slain after answering the door to a guest who wished to see Ryoma, who from upstairs hears this scuffle, opens his door to shout down at his bodyguard to knock it off because he thought he was wrestling with a friend. Instead, Ryoma is charged at. A confused melee ensues as lamps are knocked over and the room became dark. Ryoma is beyond injured, missing limbs and parts of his forehead, and he dies later that night, regretting with his last words that his killers caught him unprepared. Shintaro survives only to succumb to injuries 2 days later, never regaining enough consciousness to identify assassins, but mentioning hearing a specific dialect amongst the killers. The night of the killing was eventually called the Omiya Incident. The professional killers were never discovered or distinguished, yet they are presumably individuals from a master shogun bunch. Ryoma is still venerated as one of Japan's most noteworthy and most regarded legends.
Number 5. Private Warbear. It wasn't just members of the human species who took part in WW2. No sir, mules, dogs, pigeons, horses, bears. Bears? Soldiers in Poland had come across a bear cub on the side of the road whose mother had been unfortunately removed from this world by hunters. One of these soldiers decided he was going to raise the cub as his own, and named him Wojtek. Wojtek was trained by this soldier and a civilian, and eventually he was even enlisted in the Polish army so that he could legally come aboard a British transport ship. Fortunately, he didn't actually do any fighting, but he was given his own paybook, serial number, and the rank of private. He would bunk up with other soldiers, loved beer and cigarettes, and helped transport supplies including heavy boxes of ammunition. Nice.
Number 4. Rough Riders. Okay, think about the toughest guy you know. Maybe it's your dad, maybe it's your uncle, maybe it's you.
Maybe it's me.
No matter who it is, I bet they aren't as tough as Teddy Roosevelt, the 26th President of the United States. He was well known for being a man who enjoyed nature, the explorer's man if you will, safari hunter, Nobel Peace Prize winner, soldier, and a big booster for the National Park System. The man did it all, but did you know that during a speech in 1912, President Roosevelt was shot? Gasp. Now before I tell you what happened next, I want you to take a guess what happened next. Did he A. drop to the ground and perish, or B. the assassin was a lousy shot and missed, giving the president a chance to return fire? What's your answer? Type down below. Well, the answer was secret option C. I gotcha. He was shot and showed the crowd that he was. And then he said, I can no longer make a long speech because I have been shot, where he then continued to deliver an 82-minute speech. What a man.
Number 3. Pepsi Army. Did you know that the company Pepsi actually had the world's 6th largest military for a brief moment in time? Okay, so basically what happened is that Pepsi realized that they were inferior to Coca-Cola, and so they installed AI into their Pepsi cans worldwide, creating an autonomous army of soda cans. No, that's not what happened, you goof. Actually, in 1959, at an American exhibition, PepsiCo tried to prove the great concept of capitalism. Pepsi actually did a pretty good job. But the cash of the Soviet Union wasn't really accepted all over. So, instead, the Soviets traded submarines, military ships, and a lot of vodka for tons and tons and tons of Pepsi. Enough that Pepsi ranked 6th among the world's military powers until it sold all of that.
Number 2. Emu War. Australia. Land of sun, beaches, and spiders that got too buff. Too much for me. But today we're talking about my friends from down under. Shout out to the Aussies. Chetty loves you. But we gotta talk about the Emu War, guys. What the heck was going on there? In a nutshell, emus were causing havoc in Australia's agriculture sector and destroying farms at an alarming rate. So the government said, "Right then, take it easy, get rid of the buggers." A couple of soldiers were given large automatic weapons to deal with the pests. Well, it didn't turn out very well, as the emus just didn't seem to want to eat the bullets. Can you blame them? I can't. One Australian politician jested that the emus should be given medals for their bravery. In the end, the emus won.
Number 1. Free Fallen. 50 years ago, on January 26, 1972, Vesna Vulovic, a flight attendant from Serbia who worked for the Yugoslavian airline JAT, got on board JAT Flight 367 to Copenhagen. Also on board that flight, unfortunately, was a device inside a briefcase that went boom over Czechoslovakia. While everyone else on board did not survive, Miss Vulovic was stuck inside the shattered fuselage by a food cart as the plane and Vesna fell 33,000 feet. Thankfully, there were trees to break the fall and snow to cushion the landing near a small Czech village. But Vesna still suffered a skull fracture, broken legs, 3 broken vertebrae, she was temporarily paralyzed from the waist down, and put in a coma, leaving her with no memory of the flight or her descent. While there was some skepticism about the way the flight went down, she still received a Guinness World Record for the longest survived fall without a parachute. So that makes up for everything, right? Yeah.
Number 10. Fistus and Porcello. 2 1600-year-old Roman curse tablets were finally deciphered at a museum in Italy. First off, how pissed off are you to spend multiple days chipping away at rock and metal, jotting down an eternal curse? Usually a couple deep breaths in about 5 minutes gets you over about anything in life. A drawing of a snake-headed deity, possibly Hecate, the goddess of the underworld and sorcery. The crossed arms symbolize the binding of this deity to the curse. This is what it says. Crush, kill Fistus the senator. May Fistus dilute, languish, sink, and may all his limbs dissolve. Okay, that's a little harsh, no? The other tablet cursing Porcello. Quote, destroy, crush, kill, strangle Porcello and his wife Morilia. Their soul, heart, buttocks, liver. Like liver? They were acquired by the museum in the 19th century, then forgotten until their rediscovery in 2009. Could be anywhere in the late Roman Empire. The 2 curses, written in Latin, lay at the Museo Archeologico Civico. How pissed off are you to want to dissolve someone? You know what I mean? Honestly. Number 9. Jack the Ripper. As always, if you dig what we do here, throw us a thumbs up down below. Let us know in the comments which one of these true stories scared you the most. Okay, in the poverty-ridden districts of East London in 1888, newspapers were claiming horrific headlines surrounding one Jack the Ripper. Evidence shows throats cut, abdominal surgeries, well, much closer to mutilations more than anything, taking at least 5 women's lives and leaving a horrific sight behind. The removal of organs led authorities to propose that the killer had anatomical and surgical knowledge, highly educated, possibly a doctor or a surgeon. Numerous letters were received by media and authorities from the Scotland Yard proposing a murderer was amidst the city. The title Jack the Ripper spewed across every newspaper. The murders were never solved, and the legends surrounding these crimes became a combination of historical research, pseudo-history, and fear-inducing media. Number 8. The Ancient Ram Inn. An ancient old haunted inn, huh? Wonder how much rooms are going for nowadays. Also a fully functioning haunted pub. It's located in Watton-under-Edge, a market town within Gloucestershire, England. Look at this place, it's like bending and molding to the earth over time. The inn has been owned and operated by many, as it's the oldest building in the village going back about 1,000 years. 1145. Hope they cleaned up their beer taps a little. The inn was said to have been owned by the St. Mary's Church when first built, and of course it's haunted. The Ancient Ram Inn has been investigated by years of paranormal researchers. Shows like Ghost Adventures, Most Haunted. The inn was investigated by a UK paranormal group, the Ghost Club, the oldest paranormal research organization in the world. Not to mention the backyard is home to about a 5,000-year-old pagan burial ground where witches were apparently burned at the stake. Yeah. I'll just take the Guinness pot pie to go, please. Thanks. Number 7. The Philip Experiment. A local 1972 parapsychology experiment called, simply named, the Philip Experiment, was conducted just down the street from us here in Toronto. University professor and mathematician team Dr. A.R. George Owen and Dr. Joel Witten were attempting to prove that poltergeists are just manifestations of the human psyche and not actually really supernatural beings. They created a lecture and fictitious character in an attempt to communicate with said entity through a controlled seance. The character was named Philip. His fictional backstory coincided with real historic events and places. Born in 1624 England, had an early military career, knighted by 16 in the English Civil War, and died at 30. Then the group was seated around a table via lecture hall. The professors then dimmed the lights, leaned into the seance, and participants began feeling a presence. Lots of table vibrations, breezes, unexplained voices, sounds that matched up to Philip's life quite a bit. At one point, even the table went up on a single leg and was even apparently thrown across the room by itself. Audio, video, and witness accounts documented the paranormal events. Yeah, this is like really scary stuff. Again, like right down there. Number 6, the Enfield Monster. In 1973, 2 McDaniel children of Enfield, Illinois claimed to see a weird creature lurking amongst their backyard. After weeks of this, their parents figured it was just the kids, being kids. After being awoken by a strange scratching sound one night, Dad, Henry McDaniel, grabbed his gun and a flashlight and peeked outside. There, between the bushes, he saw a creature that was, quote, almost like a human body. Just as his kids had mentioned, a humanoid creature. 3 legs on it, a short body, 2 little short arms, and 2 pink eyes as big and bright as flashlights. McDaniel said he fired 4 shots and he was sure that he hit the creature at least once, causing it to hiss like a wildcat at him before it ran off. Ow! McDaniel said he saw the creature jump 80 feet in 3 jumps, sprinting out of sight. The police found scratches on the door as well as footprints that looked like dog. Other eyewitness claims began to surface after the McDaniels reported it 3 more times. They tried to write this off as maybe a kangaroo escaped from a nearby zoo. Like, no.
Oh look, it's the D-Bags day off. Camp staff, check out this jolly-go-lucky group. They got the day off of work because the weather was nice for the first time in a long time. During the wartime, that must have been awesome, especially being young. Finally shirk responsibility, maybe go get a pint, have a picnic, hang out with each other, maybe get a little frisky, lavishing in the sun. I'm done looking at them. In fact, I'm sick by having to look at them. When that group of people is gonna have lighted and silly summer fun on a day off, they're going back to their jobs at the camps of World War II to do exactly what you're thinking they would be doing for work when I say they work at the camps of World War II. And they enjoyed it. This wasn't one of those mandatory war jobs or excuses you can make up for following orders. These young adults, who may as well be the grandmothers, grandfathers, or great-grandma or pa of people even watching, chose to do this job and actively enjoyed it. So this is a good reminder it's not that far in the past, and these people most likely took lives shortly before or after this photo was taken. Did Halloween come early, or is it just Sylvester Claus? Yeah, so I chose this photo out of, trust me, like thousands of equally creepy ones because I feel it truly captures the what the bleep factor this holiday has. And they do it every 31st of December to 13th of January. The Sylvester Clausen of Ernach and the surrounding area Appenzell custom that is famous throughout Switzerland. The custom derives its charm from the unique blending of contrasts such as nature and art, mystery and tradition, harmony and anarchy. The Sylvester Claus that ushered the old year out and ring in the new. There are 3 types of these clauses: the beautiful, the ugly, and the pretty ugly. Common to all the clauses are bells in various shapes and sizes that they wear on their bodies. Their rituals begin in the early morning each day. The various schuppel meet at the village square before each group goes its own way. A group will pull up in front of your house, then hop around and jump up and down to make the bells ring, and then they start yodeling at you. You listen to the yodel, they say Happy New Year, give you some cash, some liquor you have to drink from a straw, and then they just leave. Dark backstory gossip, however, in times of poverty and hunger, which afflicted the region frequently, Clausen was a way to earn a little extra money, and in the 1930s, what was known as Belchel Claus, aka the Beggar Claus, began to appear on the streets. Essentially homeless Santa Clauses, but Santa looked like that. As a result, the influx of beggars in the Claus Guide resulted in heavy restrictions, and in the 1950s, the custom had nearly died out. It's only thanks to the initiative of individuals in the 1970s that this got to come back and enjoys enormous popularity today. Somebody come get their creepy uncle. Cannot tell me this isn't the energy this photo gives. Creepy uncle. The woman is unidentified, but definitely a follower to be able to handle that guy's BO and greasy hands on her. It was taken of the Children of God leader, David Berg. This group started in 1968 in California after Berg claimed God himself had gifted him with prophecies. In reality, Berg started making extreme demands of his followers, give up their money, worldly possessions in exchange for limited outside access, horrible cramped living conditions, brainwashing, and would make this group famous for really bad reasons I can't and would rather not get into. Former members of COG have been outspoken about the childhood they suffered growing up in the communes. Actress Rose McGowan, the most famously outspoken, published her story of 9 years in the group. Actors Joaquin and River Phoenix, also raised in the cult, had it harder than Rose, and that trauma plagued River especially. He was actually the original heartthrob of the 80s and 90s, a role, fun fact, DiCaprio only managed to take once River's substance addiction caused by his traumatic childhood unfortunately took his life. So more of an unfun fact, but the matter stands that River painted the way for DiCaprio, and this psycho ruined a lot of people's lives. Have you ever seen a photo you can feel? Before you see the photo itself, you're gonna learn about the man in it. So, Joseph Goebbels, a National Socialist politician and propagandist who held multiple high-rank roles in the Yahtzee party. As a party chief for Greater Berlin, 1926 to 45, Reich leader of propaganda, 1929 to 45, and in 1933, the push-broom mustache twit appointed Joseph the Minister for Propaganda and Public Enlightenment. He was a devout, unbridled through and through bigot, a tireless agitator, and the propaganda this man designed, wrote, and funded had shipped through dozens of countries and shaped the perspective of Jews in a way that can actually never be undone. It's this propaganda many people still cite when asked for factual basis or logical argument as what Jews had done oh so wrong. It's Joseph who orders the mass burning of literature, who sentenced thousands to death, and who made up lies to ensure hatred, a hatred that still stands today. And I want you guys to see how he looked at them. So here is the photo, finally. This is a picture of Joseph Goebbels taken only seconds after he found out the photographer was Jewish. In this photo, you can feel it, and it's effing terrifying. And now, the last photo is from El Monte, 6 May. That's the date written on this photo from the LAPD Collective, and it's the only other photo from said collection I chose to put on this list aside from the holes in the car window. As follows is the photo and James Elroy's written description of it. This is a detective modeling a mask worn by Baxter Shorter's crew. Shorter was in a gaggle with Emmett Perkins, Jack Santos, and Barbara Graham. The three of them then killed an old woman named Mabel Monahan on 9 March 1953. Shorter was appalled by his gaggle's violence. He ratted the others out, and Santo and Perkins kidnapped him in front of his pad on Bunker Hill, took him to the mountains, and killed him. Shorter had a sister that lived in El Monte, and they were hunting through it for evidence. This mask was in her pad. James Elroy. If Mabel Monahan's former son-in-law Tudor Scherer hadn't been a Las Vegas gambler, the 60-year-old widow probably would have never been killed. Also, if she didn't stay friends with him after he divorced her daughter, that'd probably have helped. But she did, and people found that weird. So there had to be something at play, right? Maybe Scherer trusted her so much he stored his 100 grand floats there. Ex-cons Emmett Perkins, John True, and Jack Santos think that, and they plan to take it. Barbara Graham joins the group to be their key into the door. Mabel takes a while to open up, but Barbara persuades her with the story of a broken down car and pleas for the phone. Mabel was reluctant, but the young woman was alone, and the widow knew firsthand how scary it could be for a woman to be on her own at night, so she let her in. And in comes John True, Jack, Emmett, wearing rubber masks. We're gonna take a pause. Ladies and female presenters, our own sex does not guarantee our safety, and you can't predict anyone's intentions. Please trust your gut if it says don't open that door. Mabel is struck on the head, left gagged and bleeding in the hallway. The group ransacks her home for a safe that never exists and panic when there is none, so they just leave her there. Mabel is dead for 2 days in her home before she's found. The investigation into the slaying of the Burbank widow began, and it was a long one, filled with drama. In the end, the four are charged with conspiracy to commit burglary, robbery, and M-word on June 3rd, 1953, in the death of Miss Mabel Monahan.
Number 10, Flat Earth. Alright folks, let's just get it out of the way here. There's no such thing as a flat earth. Say it with me. There is no such thing as a flat earth. Never has, never will. Those that wish to ignore factual proven evidence of such, well, I salute you. That's the same kind of stubbornness that keeps old marriages still alive. No, my keys are not on the key hook. They're where I left them, in the dish by the kitchen. That's where they always go. They're probably on the key hook. All stale marriage jokes aside, the Flat Earth community has been busy. Say what you will about them, but they are not lazy. Years of experiments, research, and conventions with awkward handshakes have concluded one result. Earth is not round. I'd like to come out here today and tell you folks all about the models and theories presented to you by the Flat Earth community, but all you need to know is that Earth's flat, the government is watching you, and I wear women's underwear. Two of those things are true, and one is a fib. See if you can figure it out. Number 9, the Battle of Tonkin. In the 1960s, there was a little old country in the little old east causing a whole heap of trouble. Vietnam was about to turn red, and not the kind of red you feel when your crush asks you to homecoming. But the kind of red that makes luxuries hard to come by, and lineups for bread and ration, comrade. The United States, not wanting any more communist countries on the map, decided action was needed and parked a whole bunch of spooky, scary Navy ships in the Tonkin Bay. That's close to Vietnam. That's when they were fired upon. So, like a good game of Hasbro's Battleship, they fired back. And shortly after that, the war in Vietnam had started. Ooh, okay, spicy. Trouble is, the Tonkin Bay incident was very fishy from the start, as a lot of the reports just didn't line up. For a while, it seemed staged, and years later, it kinda was, as the situation wasn't as black and white as originally presented. It was more of a gray thing, and they might have used it as an scapegoat to go and do what they did. Uh-oh. Number 8, small fry Japan versus Russia. The turn of the century was an interesting time to say the least. Spent enough time on it in history class, always did my history homework, but nations were becoming free, factories and black smoke from industry filled the skies, and the idea of having roads filled with cars instead of horses was becoming more of a reality instead of a dream each day. However, some were still behind the times and some were still flexing imperial muscles. Take Russia and Japan in 1905 for instance. Japan, a brand new industrialized modern country, was expanding westward. Russia, an old imperial power that had not modernized, was expanding eastward. They met not too far from Korea. Now, tensions were high, but it wasn't until a Japanese train carrying supplies was destroyed that a war broke out. The thing is, the train maybe kind of could have been a scapegoat by the Japanese to start a war. I'm not sure, it could have been, I don't know. Number 7, World War II. Imagine you were a farmer in France after losing your livelihood in the battles of World War I. Your fields were destroyed, the barn's gone, the land is tainted by the horrors and disease of the war. Then, after 20 years of long and hard work bringing your farm back to life, it all gets destroyed again in a second global war. That would be 10 times as destructive as the first. Oof. Sounds like someone's out to get you. Well, all jokes aside and actual battles aside, World War II is full of fishy events that are very sus and make you squint when hearing about certain information. Like for example, leading German scientists mysteriously disappearing and America very quickly developing a rocket program thereafter. Or like top German scientists taking vacation photos on a beautiful beach in Sao Paulo. Some things just don't add up. Strange. Number 6, Roy Sullivan. The Human Lightning Rod. Heck of a nickname. Wish that was my nickname in high school, but well earned. Roy Sullivan was a park ranger in Virginia and spent his time in the same river John Denver likes to sing about. What makes Roy different from every other park ranger who spends too much time alone? Lightning. Between the years of 1942 and 1977, Roy was struck by lightning 7 times and survived all of them. It got to the point where people wanted to avoid him in fear that they too would be crisped up like someone who's too good at Mario Kart from a lightning bolt. He's recognized by Guinness World Records as being struck by lightning 7 times and surviving 7 times. Pretty impressive. I don't have any Guinness records. I wish I did.
Number 5 spot today we have Mount Pinatubo. This is a photo that is showing Mount Pinatubo, which is located in the Philippines, on June 15th, 1991. That is the day that this volcano erupted into what would be the second largest volcanic eruption of the 20th century. Certainly impressive, also extremely terrifying. This photo shows the pyroclastic flow full of hot gas and rock being flung into the air. Eruptive activity in the volcano first started on April 2nd of that year, which prompted researchers to set up seismographs in the area. By June, the volcano was having a group of progressively shallower eruptions before, on June 12th, the volcano had its first spectacular eruption, which sent an ash column 19 kilometers up into the atmosphere. After more highly gas-charged magma reached the surface on June 15th, the volcano once again exploded, this time sending the cloud of ash 40 kilometers up into the atmosphere. Volcanic ash and pumice blanketed the surrounding area, and pyroclastic flows filled what were once deep valleys with fresh volcanic deposits. It was truly magnificent and extremely powerful, and this photo shows just that. In our number 4 spot today we have the Pioneers Defense. This photo is known as the Pioneers Defense, and Man, does it ever look creepy. This photo comes from 1937 and it was taken by a Russian photographer named Viktor Bulla. This photo takes place in the Leningrad area, which is now known as St. Petersburg, which is the second largest city in Russia. The people in this photo were part of a group that was the 1930s Russian equivalent of our Boy Scouts, and it was called the Young Pioneers. The masks on their faces leave a very eerie feeling, and for a fair reason. These people were doing a military preparation drill, which is the reason for the gas masks. This photo was taken during a time where the country was under the dictatorship of Joseph Stalin, and the residents were constantly unsure of what was going to happen. The country was already seeing death and people were already frightened just a few years before the start of World War II. In our number 3 spot today we have the lipstick. This is a photo that comes to us from December 10th, 1945. If looking at this image gives you a shudder down your spine, that absolutely makes sense, as it was written by a terrible person known as the Lipstick Killer. This photo is an image of a note he left written on the wall at one of his crime scenes. The photo comes from the apartment of Frances Brown, as just before he wrote this message, he took her life. After this message was left, he ended up taking the life of one other person before he was finally caught by police 6 months later. The message scrawled in the photo reads, quote, "For heaven's sake, catch me before I kill more. I cannot control myself." It is an absolutely chilling note with a horrifying backstory. In our number 2 spot today we have the acid drum. This photo comes to us from inside the house of another terrible person, the serial killer Jeffrey Dahmer, made very famous recently. This photo was taken from the inside of his home after he was found out and caught by authorities. Before his arrest, he was sadly able to take the lives of 17 different people. Although this photo might look kind of plain, the horrors are plentiful. This shot shows a drum full of acid that was located inside of his home. Probably don't really need to tell you what it was used for. I can't imagine the horrors investigators saw when they entered his home, and even previous to that as they investigated his crimes. Thankfully, Jeffrey was caught, and in 1992 he was sentenced to life in prison, but just 2 years later he was killed by a fellow prison inmate. In our number 1 spot today we have the Dyatlov Pass incident. If you have never heard of the Dyatlov Pass incident, you better buckle in because it is so terrifying. This photo was taken in February of 1959 as 9 young Soviet hikers set out to trek through the Ural Mountains. They had set up a camp, and sometime during the night, something happened that made them cut their way out of the tent and all flee the site. Leaving in such a rush, they were of course underdressed for the bitterly cold weather, and 6 of them ended up passing away from hypothermia, which is extremely tragic. The other 3, however, is where this story takes an even more frightening turn. Like I mentioned before, no one knows why they fled the tent in the first place, and the last 3 hikers were found passed away with severe signs of physical trauma that no one agreed on what had caused it. In 2019, the investigation was reopened, and just last year there was a conclusion that a kind of avalanche called a slab avalanche was the cause for these injuries. Before you come at me in the comments, I know that not everyone is convinced that's what happened, and I don't blame you. It's really strange. So, down below in the comments, let me know what you think. Let's solve this mystery once and for all together in the YouTube comments. Regardless of what happened, this whole incident was of course very tragic, but the mystery behind it definitely takes it to a very spooky place.